Welcome to this presentation on creating transitions and animations in PowerPoint. Our objectives for this lesson are to understand the difference between a transition and an animation, apply transitions between pages in PowerPoint, and apply animations to text and graphics in PowerPoint. So, the first thing we're going to do in PowerPoint is look at a couple of slides that I've set up. I've created a title slide with some audio on it. Welcome to this presentation on understanding copyright law. So that's my title page, and I've also created a second page, my objectives page. The objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law, define and understand royalty-free material. So you get define, understand the concept of. So you get the picture of where I'm going with this. And I'm just going to work with these two slides in order to show you how to add transitions between slides, which we're going to do first. And then we're going to do some animation within the slides with text and graphics. So the first thing I'm going to do is I like to start my presentations in black and then fade from black. So I'm going to add a new slide at the very beginning. So I'm going to click at the top, I'm going to insert a new slide. And within the slides, I don't want a title slide, I want this slide to be completely black. So I'm going to go to the layout and I'm going to pick a blank slide. That makes it easier. It won't have any excess graphics or anything on this slide. I just want a plain black slide. And now to make this slide black, I'm going to go to Format Background. And it's very easy to change this. I can go to color. I'm going to click black. And notice here it says apply or apply to all. I'm going to apply. If I apply it to all of my slides will turn black in the background, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply a black background. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I want to go from this slide to this slide. I want to add a transition. So I'm going to go to the Transitions button. Notice there are a lot of transitions here. Some of them, when you start playing around with them, they'll look really cool, or they may look really dumb, or they may not look like they do much at all. So you can go through here and try these out and play with them. I'll just go ahead and add something here. Now where I want the transition won't be on this slide because this slide is the first thing we're going to see. So where I'm going to want to add the transition is onto this next slide. Because I'm going from this slide, transitioning to this slide, I want to add the transition here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just pick something, random bars. So it gives you an idea of what it'll look like. And within that, there's a duration of the transition itself. 1 second is plenty long enough. There's also options here, so I can do it horizontal or I can do it vertical. So every transition will have different things that you can do with it. So let's just take a look at this. Let's go back to the beginning and play this back. And after 2 seconds, the new slide pops in. So let's escape to get out of that. I really don't like that transition, so I'm going to go back, and I myself prefer fades, especially once you get into the project and you have the same background on the slides. Then the transitions will look kind of weird because it's going from the same background to the same background. You don't get the full effect. So since we're going same background to same background throughout the rest of this, I'm going to use a fade. And when you use a fade, what appears to happen between slides, which we'll see later, is it looks like the text is fading in and out, but the background stays the same. So let's go back. I've got a fade on here, and I'm going to make that 1 full second. And let's go back to the beginning and play this back. And fades in to the first slide. Okay, so now we have our first transition applied. I'm going to work a little bit with this slide. I'm not going to do anything fancy here, but what we do know is I have some audio on here, so let's take a look at the audio. Welcome to this presentation on understanding copyright law. Now when you look here, what's important here is this 6.71 seconds. Okay, we want this slide to play by itself, and at the end of the 6.71 seconds, we want this slide to advance to the next slide. So I'm looking over here at advanced slide. when are we going to do this? I'm going to turn off on mouse click because I want to do this automatically. I'm going to click after. And then we know it was 6.71 seconds. So let's round that up to 7. And then this slide should play. At 7 seconds, it will move to the next slide. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this audio, by double clicking on this icon, I want to make sure that this audio starts when I want it to. Now notice up here it says the audio start on click. Well, I don't want it to start on the click. I want it to start automatically. So when the transition happens from this slide to this slide, it will automatically start the audio. When the audio is done playing, it will move to the next slide. So let's see if that actually works. Welcome to this presentation on understanding copyright law. And there we go. Everything's working as I planned. That's a good sign. One thing that we do have here is on this particular slide, this ugly icon here. Let's double click on it so we can see it up here. On the playback options, we don't really want to see that in the middle of our slide, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to hide that icon during the show. So now if I play that back again, welcome to this presentation. Notice that the icon is gone. Okay, so we've gone through 2 different slides now. Let's go ahead and move on to this next slide. And I'm going to add one more transition here. So I'm going to go back to my transitions. I'm going to add another fade. I'm going to do the 1 second. Keep it consistent. So let's play this back. I'm going to play it back from this slide so we're going to have to watch everything through again. Welcome to this presentation on understanding copyright law. Okay, so we have the transition into the new slide, and now we're getting ready to start working on some animations. Now let's take a look at this. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a graphic in here for us to play around with some animations. So I'm going to insert that that image. So I'm going to go to insert photo picture from file. I like using the drop down menus. Some people like to use these menus up here. The drop downs just seem quicker to me. That's why I choose to do it that way. So within my files here, I have this buried deep, so it's going to take me a second to find it. I have this in my movies folder. There it is. And I have these fancy file systems that I have to dig deep, but at least I know where everything is. So I'm going to take this image and I'm going to play around with it here. And I'm just going to set it down in this corner. Okay, so we have some text on this page, we have some audio on this page, and we have some graphics on this page. First thing I'm going to do is let's take a listen to this audio. And now, something I typically don't like to do is put the exact same audio on as what I have as far as the text goes, but sometimes with objectives it's not a bad idea. It reinforces the ideas. So as we listen through this, the objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law. Now notice I stopped after that first line. I know where I want to go. And 6.94 I know is where that stops at. At 6.94 seconds, I know that's when I'm going to have this first line. I'm going to animate it into the show. To the second piece, define and understand royalty-free material. I'll go figure out where that happens as we go. But I like to know where each piece ends up. So play it further. Define and understand royalty-free material. Okay, that's at 11:30. So it gives you an idea of how much time each piece of audio will play. So I'm going to leave this icon on here for the time being because it's kind of ugly. But we can go ahead and set this now. So when we play it back, it's going to start automatically, and we can go back and test it. And we're going to hide the icon during the show. So we got that set up. And the first thing I'm going to do is when the audio starts here, it says the objectives. The objectives for this lesson are to. So it's about 3 seconds. The objectives of this lesson. So I'm going to start by animating this icon here, this copyright icon. So I'm going to go to the animations tab, and once again, there are tons of animations here. I'm going to start with the hard thing first and work towards the easier. These are kind of click and it automatically adds the transition, and it makes it pretty simple. What I'm going to play with here is paths. I really like paths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my object here, which is the icon. I'm going to go to my animations. I'm going to go to paths, and then I'm going to, kind of like this little bounce one right here. So I'm going to add the bounce path. Now notice how my object kind of goes off in an odd direction. So what I want to do is I actually want it to start over here off the screen. So I'm going to click on my object. I'm going to put it up here. Okay. And now if I were to play that back, it would just drop right to there. What I really want it to do now is if I click on the transition itself, okay, notice these handles. I can now animate this transition. So I'm going to grab this corner. Notice how it stretches out. And it goes from the center of the icon. So I'm going to move this to about here. So before we can play this back, we want to make sure that we have this set up to start when we're ready, this animation. And we want the animation to happen after the transition. So notice up here, as we click on the animation itself, we can go to when to start. There are options here. On click, that means when it gets to the slide, when I want the transition to start, I would have to click on the slide to get that animation to work. Then there's with previous or after previous. At this point, notice the number 1 here by this animation that means this is the first animation on this particular slide. So in this case, there is no after previous because this is the first one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on with previous in order to play this back automatically. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start from this slide. Let's take a look at this and play it back and see what happens. Welcome to this presentation on understanding copyright law. The objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law. And there you have it. So we have this nice little animated graphic to start out the scene. So now that I have this animated graphic come in, I'm going to animate this text to come in on cue as best I can with the audio. In PowerPoint, it's not an exact science, so we just kind of have to play around with it. So the first thing I do, I'm going to select this first piece of text, and I'm going to select a transition. Again, there are all kinds of transitions here, and as you click on them, you can see them play back. Some of them are weird, some of them are ugly. I'm just going to take this fly in. I like this fly in. Notice when I click on it, it plays from the bottom. And I'm okay with the fly in, but I'm actually going to go over here, and I'm going to have it come in from the left. Because this graphic comes in from the right, I don't want this text flying over top of it, so I'm just going to have them slide in from the left to the right. So notice how this starts to line up 0, 1. This is the next graphic. That's going to change in a few minutes, but if I click on this transition, notice up here I have some more options. And again, it's kind of weird how this works in the animation, but I don't want this to be on click because the viewer is so far seen everything happen in front of their eyes. They're going to expect that to happen and not know when to click. So you have click with previous and after previous. Well, the fact is I want to time this out. So I'm going to go with previous. So if you watch this now, you can also play this back over here. So
the objectives
you can
for
see
this
how it
lesson
plays in.
are
Now notice how it played in. It came in at exactly the same time as this particular graphic. Well, I don't particularly want it to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slow it down first of all, and I'm going to have it coming in about 2 seconds. Now over here, this says reorder, but it also has a lot of other options in it. So notice the different effect options. And then here's, each piece you can go through and you can make adjustments to. So I can make adjustments to the sound, the picture, the content. And this is this piece of text that I'm working with now. One thing I like to do is I like to have smooth ins and outs. So I'm going to click on smooth end from left. There's other options here. You can change colors. You can make all kinds of weird things happen there. You can add sound to it. I'm not going to do that because it's just annoying. But you can play around with those things as you learn. It's great fun anyway, if nothing else. And then notice the timing with previous. If I put on after previous, it's going to wait until the end before it actually happens. So what I'm going to do is, I got the speed set. I'm going to put this on a delay. So I know this particular graphic comes in and it lands at about 3 seconds. So I'm going to delay that 2 seconds, and then we'll take a look at it and see what happens at that point. So I'm going to slide this box over here since we're going to be using it, and let's just play this back.
the objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law.
So next I'm going to animate each of these lines of text. So I'm going to select the next one, and I'm going to add a transition, and I'm going to go back to fly in again. And notice since I kept this box open, the custom animation, I can go in here and start making my changes immediately from here because I want it to come in from the left. No sound. I'm going to do the smooth end. I'm going to take this and do it with previous because I do want it to start with the last one with a delay. And I want that delay to happen at a specific time. This one will be at about 7 seconds. Remember we looked at it was 6.74. So I'm going to make that delay at 7 seconds. And let's go ahead and take a look and see what happens.
The objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law, define and understand royalty-free material, define, understand the concept.
Okay, so we have the next one come in. And now I've gone ahead and I've predetermined about when each of these will come in. So I'm going to keep doing this process until I get everything to work the way I want it to. So I'm going to highlight this piece of text. I'm going to fly in. I'm going to do it from the left. I'm going to do it with previous. Okay, and now when you do it with previous, it will measure from the beginning of the animation. So my next piece was at about 11.3 seconds, so I'm going to go ahead and make this 11. I'm going to round to the closest second, and let's play back.
The objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law, define and understand royalty-free material, define, understand the concept of fair use, discuss and reflect on how copyright law affects.
So you see it plays back pretty well. Let's go ahead and animate this last piece. We'll fly in. We'll do it from the left with previous. And I measured this one to be at about 16 seconds. I don't have to click it. I can enter the 16. I just want to make sure that's entered in there. It stays at 16. And let's do the smooth end. And let's go ahead and play it back and see how it looks.
The objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law, define and understand royalty-free material, Define, understand the concept of fair use. Discuss and reflect on how copyright law affects the instructional design profession. So we've applied some transitions and some animations, and we've timed it out with the audio, timed out our animations with the audio, so you got a chance to see how all that works. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and transition out of this so you can see how that will work. First thing I need to do is make sure that this slide that we're on is ready for a transition out. So I'm going to go ahead and select this slide. I'm going to go back to my transitions. Now notice that advanced slide is still on mouse click because that's where I left it from the beginning. We don't want that to happen, so we're going to turn that off and we're going to do after. Now if you remember correctly, we wanted to time this out, so let's take a look at the audio. And if we notice all the way to the end that this slide is about 24 seconds, 23.95 seconds. So we want this slide to last 24 seconds. And I can't type, so let me do that a couple of times till I get it right. So I got 24 seconds, and after 24 seconds, this slide is ready for a new transition. It's going to move to the next slide. In order to do that, I'm going to copy this particular slide. And I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to paste that slide at the end. Notice it doesn't carry over the black background. It keeps this because this is what is applied. This background is what applied to all the slides. So I'm going to have to go back and change that background to black again. Only takes a second. Apply that. Okay, so now I'm going to have this slide fade to black. In order to do that, I want to add the fade to this particular slide. Okay. Now notice on this slide, it's on advance after 2. I'm going to put this on mouse click, just so that's the last slide and that's how it'll end. So let's take a quick look and see if that's working. The objectives for this lesson are to understand the basics of copyright law, define and understand royalty-free material, define, understand the concept of fair use, discuss and reflect on how copyright law affects the instructional design profession. There we go. Everything's working beautifully. So that's our presentation on transitions and animations. Now I'm going to leave it to you to use this to the best of your ability to complete our copyright project.